Hello and welcome back, guys. So in today's video we will be looking at JavaScript objects, which are a very powerful data structure, kind of like arrays. Now the object type can be defined as a collection of properties or information that is stored together. So let's see how a JavaScript object is actually written. You can write a JavaScript object simply like this, like variable John equals to, then the curly brackets, then you can have his age, so let's say 31, have a nickname, let's just do Johnny. We can have a hobby, which is playing football, I guess. Football. And and finally we can have their living status. So is dead is to false, right? And then we end it. Now this is how a JavaScript object is written. I'm going to save this file actually. Wait. I'm going to save this file as JavaScript objects.js. Save. Okay, you see the colors change, so you can see that it's working. Now, this is how a JavaScript object is written. It's kind of like an array, right? Like you can store information, except the only difference is that a JavaScript object is more dynamic, Array is like a list. Over here, you can store values, their attributes, and then it's just more dynamic. Now, let's try to access this John in the console. So let me minimize this. So let me show you guys how we can access John on the console. So I open this up, I Control C and then paste it over here. Oh, okay, I made a mistake. Sorry, here, comma, enter. Okay, so now when I access variable John, you can see all the attributes pop up over here. Age, hobby, is dead status, nickname, and it also tells us that this is a JavaScript object. Okay, now, for example, let's say you wanted to access a specific information from this variable, like you wanted John's age, or you wanted the nickname, or you wanted the hobby. So remember, when we were doing arrays, all we had to do was just like list and then like the first element, the second element, or the third element, and you could have accessed them. Over here, for example, if I wanted to access John's age, all I need to do is john.age, and I enter, and I have access to John's age. If I want to access John's hobby, john.hobby, and I can see that it's football. Now, arrays had functions, like push, pop, concat to edit them. For objects, if you want to add something, all you need to do is just John dot, let's say I want to add his favorite player. John dot favorite player is equal to Messi. Enter. Messi. Now, if I access John again, you can see that over here, if I favorite player Messi, it has already been added. In objects, you can also alter the values that are already written. Let me just clear this and get this again. Now, in objects, you can also alter the values that you have already written. Like, for example, let's say John had a horrible injury and now John is dead. So all you need to do is just say John dot is dead equals to true. Now if I access John again, you can see that I have altered a value that was already inside it. Now both arrays and objects have their own purposes, their own strengths and weaknesses, pros and cons. They are both useful. You might be thinking objects are more useful because they're more dynamic, but no, they both have their own purposes. Arrays are very good to make stuff like lists, whereas objects are very good to make, let's say, a game character, for example. Let's say you were making a character from FIFA. So the football player in FIFA, you know, his name, his age, his club can be an object, and then the skills he possesses can be an array. So, for example, one thing to remember is that, you know, over here you can actually add arrays inside objects. So let's make one. Let's say variable player is equals to, I'm making an object right now. So the name be messy, shift enter so that it doesn't execute the command. We can say age 34, I guess. Club can be Barcelona. And then finally we can add the, we can also add his playing status is retired is to false. And then finally we can add the array over here by saying skills is to, it's an array. The skills are, say, dribbling. We have scoring. We have passing. So now, no wait, shift enter again. Don't forget to close the bracket. And now this, we have created an object that has an array inside of it. Just like that. Just similarly like this, you can also add an object inside an array. Like for example, imagine a club website and the clubs needed to list out the names of the players and how many years are left on their contract. So that would be a list. And like I said, arrays are very good at making lists, but we just don't need a list of time. We need to see the time and assign it to a name, so that becomes an object. So we need a list of objects. So we just make variable list, which, sorry, not list, which will be an array. So we'll have these brackets, but inside them we can have objects. So I can just make curly brackets, shift enter, and inside the curly brackets I can have, let's say, name is to Pogba, and time is 5 years are left before Pogba's contract is over. Then I just do shift and enter, space, comma, shift enter again. I can have another object over here, curly brackets, well, shift enter, sorry. Then we can just say name is to Rashford, and the time left on his contract is 3 years. And that's it, we're done. And just like that, now we have created an array that has objects inside it. So as you can clearly see just right now, arrays and objects are really powerful when it comes to JavaScript. Now you might be thinking that I told you before when it was just a simple, like over here, when it was just a simple object, all you need to do to access the file over here was John dot age, and you can access age. And if it were an array, for example, all you needed to do would be list and just the the value for second, third, fourth that you want to access, and you will have the access to it. Now since they are mixed up, for example, there is a object with array inside it, there is an array with objects inside it, you might be wondering how to access them. So it's really easy. Let's try to access the variable player from something from over here first. So maybe I want to access one of its skills, not just the whole thing, skills. I want to access a specific skill. Let's say I wanted to access their, whoa, I wrote dribbling wrong. Okay. I wanted to access the scoring skill. Well, that's really easy. All I need to do is player dot skill and skills. And now since it's an array, inside the skills, I want you to get the second one. And then I have access to scoring. Just like that, if I want to access something in the list over here, let's say I wanted to access Pogba's time, all I need to do over here is list. Inside the list, the first object, which is Pogba in time. Now in that object, all I want is time. So now I have access to Pogba's time. 5 years, just like that. Another interesting thing that you can do with the objects is that you can actually add functions inside them. So let me copy this and I'm going to paste this. And over here, I'm going to add a function inside it. The array is there, but let me add a function. Why not? So I'm going to call this function, what should I call it? I'm going to call it shoot. Shoot. And then it's a function. So of course you have to call it. And then the curly brackets. And then inside it, we're going to write the function over here. So the function is going to be simple alert that says goal. So when we call the function shoot, it says goal. And there we go. Now if I access the variable player, you can see all the values are here. Name, age, club, name is retired, false. It has a function f, shoot, if you want to collapse it. And it has a skills, the array of dribbling, scoring, and passing. Now you can access the function simply by saying player dot shoot, but since it's a function, you need to call it, and then it calls the function. Simple as that. Now, one thing to remember over here is that yes, it is a function, but once we put a function inside an object, it's no longer a function. It's called a method. I know these words are a little bit confusing, and sometimes I even think they're so redundant, but this is the terminology that is used, and maybe in the future, if you're working or if you're watching other YouTube tutorials or reading a documentation somewhere, this is the terminology that will be used. So I want you guys to get familiar with it. So yes, it's written like a function, it looks like a function, but once you have added this function to an object, then It's called a method. Now the last thing I'm going to show you in this video is a special kind of a JavaScript type. It's called null, and we will get into it, but let me just show you guys something first. You can have an empty object. Like for example, I can say variable me is equals to empty object. Then when I access me, it doesn't say undefined, it actually gives us an empty object. Okay, so it's not actually saying anything undefined or something, it's actually an empty object. And then we can access it like so. But there is something called null, which is a special data type. So for example, I can say variable object is equals to null. Now if I access object, now null might look like it's empty, but no, it's a separate data type. It's a separate JavaScript type. So what null means is that it has no value, but you cannot assign it value either. Okay, so to make this concept even more clear, I'm going to create two objects over here. I'm going to create a variable empty object, which is equals to be an empty object, and then I'm going to create another variable. I'm going to call it null object, and it's going to be null. Done. Now pay very close attention. I can do something like empty object dot name is equal to Chris, and it's done. Now if I access the empty object, it will have this now that object has a value name which is equals to Chris. Even though it was empty, you can actually assign something to it eventually in the future. But if I try to do the same thing with the null object, null object dot name is equal to Chris, is going to give me an error because you cannot set anything inside the null object. Like I was saying before, null means that it has no value, it is null, and you cannot assign any value to it. And right now it might be confusing and it might look like a useless thing, but it's very important, and we will see its use later on in the course. Right now, right over here, if you have understood everything so far and you can create objects and arrays and functions, and you understand the booleans, the variables, the JavaScript types that we did before, you can say that you have understood around 80% of JavaScript. I know that some of you might feel like I have maybe some of you might feel that you have learned a lot, some of you might feel that we haven't done a lot, but basically JavaScript is all about understanding the terminology and understanding the syntax, because once you understand the terminology and the syntax, you can really fly through the rest of the sections because you know how we got there. And JavaScript is a really powerful tool, and in the coming videos we're gonna get more into it, and in the next video we are gonna create a mini Spotify kind of an app just using JavaScript. So I'm really excited about that section. Hopefully you are too. And if you like our content, and if you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe so you can continue to study along with our course, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.